Welcome everyone to Still and Moving Center's Gems from the Wisdom Traditions, a conversation circle that we hold every Saturday afternoon, usually 3 to 4 p.m. Our theme for this week is also actually the theme that will progress forward into 2024, so it will become the theme for the entire year. As usual, we have on the back cover of the 2024 Almanac a short reading that we'll use to start most of our GEMS meetings with. And so, Diana, if you'd be so kind to initiate us into the year with that back cover quote.
As long as it's forward, God, send me anywhere, only go with me. Lay any burden on me, only sustain me, and sever any tie in my heart, except the tie that binds my heart to yours. If you have men who will only come if they know there's a good road, I don't want them. I want men who will come if there is no road at all. I will go anywhere, provided it is forward. David Livingston. Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you.
Yes, he was an explorer and a builder of roads, and
very powerful.
And I believe he was a Christian missionary as well. So this theme of irreversibility, eyes to the stars. I'll say it again, irreversibility, eyes to the stars. We phrased at the end of 2023 as forward, eyes to the stars. So either way we want to look at it, it's this idea of moving into the future, into a forward momentum. And in a way, I almost feel as if it's possible to ask, oh my gosh, how on earth can anything be absolutely irreversible? And that's, I think, a very valid question, and one that I suspect we're going to take up. It's still a useful concept and word, no matter whether or not we think it's actually possible to bring into the world. I want to mention that my aha when I was contemplating this word this morning was that we could think of the concept of a straight line. And when we think of a straight line, first of all, we can't ever draw a line or create a line in physical space that is completely straight. It's just not possible for us to have that kind of precision. Nor can we create a line that lasts on and on forever. And yet this idea of a straight line is so critical of a concept to us, isn't it? I mean, it's very hard to conceive of us creating anything without having an idea of a straight line. I'm thinking of our son who had one of these what's it called for children's gifts when you get them? Some assembly required for a little veterinary kit for his 4-year-old daughter. He said he came the closest he's ever come to just breaking a thing in half because he got so frustrated, but it's because he couldn't get all the pieces to line up. So we really need, I mean, just for walls to stand, if they're not upright or if they're wiggly, the building won't stand. We really need this concept of straight lines, even though it may be physically impossible to perfectly achieve it. I think this idea of irreversibility might be something like that. And it's something evidently that has to do with intentionality. It has to do with commitment, dedication, and in many cases, it sounds like from different ones of the different traditions, the power of a vow, of making such a strong commitment that it's in the form of a vow, and therefore one has set oneself on an irreversible track. At some point, I'd like us to look at the themes for next year, and look at them in regard to this idea of irreversibility. So I think we'll save that for a little later. And what I'd like to do first is to tell you the story. It's a Buddhist story from the life of the Buddha that I think is quite related to this idea of irreversibility. Some of the themes that I think are going to come up in this year's consideration of irreversibility are going to have to do with free will and destiny, and also karma, or the idea of the law of cause and effect. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. So we can maybe have some of those things in the back of our minds as we listen to this story. The name of the main character in the story, other than the Buddha himself, was Angulimala. And Anguli are fingers. Mala is a necklace. So he is known as the one who wore a necklace of human fingers. Quite the bad guy. He started out as a very good student of a teacher. He was sent to a well-known teacher, a guru, to study spiritual matters under him. And he quickly ascended through the ranks and became that guru's favorite student. This aroused quite a bit of jealousy amongst his fellow students. He was more or less the newcomer, and here he was, the teacher's favorite. So in one way or another, he was set up to look as if he had really done something wrong. One of the versions of the story says that he was accused of having an affair with the guru's wife. Another version of the story says that she tried to seduce him, and the students revealed it. In any case, the teacher managed to get convinced that he must reject this very fine student of his. And so he did a traditional thing, which is to send a student on a mission to accomplish a very specific task. The mission that he sent him on, the teacher evidently intended to cause this young man's death. He gave him the horrible mission of taking the lives, well, actually taking the fingers of 1,000 people. And he assumed that in the course of his student doing that, he would be caught and put to death. Well, his student seemed to have no other choice but to accept this mission. And he went out and became a bandit on the highways. And he didn't try to take people's clothes or money, or he just took their fingers and their lives. And he became quite bloodthirsty and quite caught up in his own power and the fear that he caused in anyone who came near him. About halfway through the Buddha's ministry, after he gained enlightenment and before he passed, the Buddha had taken up this life of traveling through India and teaching. And he, in his travels, was approaching this town that was completely deserted. And there were many, many soldiers that were in the forest that he was passing through. And they warned him, or actually they warned his disciples, that there was this terrible bandit who was extremely dangerous and that no one should get anywhere near him. Well, the Buddha's first impulse was to go straight to that bandit and see how he might be able to help him, to teach him. And his disciples pleaded with him not to go, told him how it was sure that he was going to be killed. How were they ever going to be able to carry on without him? And to think of all the people in a nearby village that were waiting and waiting for his teachings, all hundreds of people. And here he was risking his life for just one. And he was in no way dissuaded by his disciples. And he actually was kind of amused by their protests, because they really didn't have any idea of the power of the kind of love that he was going to be giving to this Angulimala. So he did proceed forward into the forest, directly past the den where Angulimala stayed. And Angulimala was very surprised to see a lone monk in a saffron robe walking past his den, and he shouted at him, "Monk, stop!" And the Buddha just calmly kept walking. And so Angulimala began running after him with his weapons, and it felt as if the faster he ran, the farther away he was getting. And the Buddha simply said, "I have stopped. It's you who is running." And this is interpreted as meaning that I have stopped doing ahimsa or harm, while you are continuing to cause all this harm, all this suffering. And Angulimala was very surprised that someone would just so calmly talk to him like this instead of running for their lives. And in fact, as he looked into the Buddha's eyes, he began to feel as if he was kind of coming under some magical spell he didn't understand at all. And the Buddha said, you have a great adventure in front of you and something much more you could be doing with your life. And Angulimala says, what could be greater than this? Every person on earth, even kings, are afraid of me. I have power over all of them. What could be greater than that? And the Buddha said, well, control over yourself. You are an absolute slave to all of your own lust for power and glory of killing, and you have no freedom from that. And Angulimala kind of was startled by this idea that there could be something greater than what he already had. And he says, is it magic? Is it magic that you're going to tell me about? And the Buddha says, well, in a way it is magic, in a way it's not. He says, but it's going to take, this adventure that I'm going to tell you about requires tremendous fearlessness and a great deal of suffering. And Angulimala says, oh, I have no fear. I'm not afraid of suffering either. So tell me, what is it? And so the Buddha unfolded to him how he was going to need to completely renounce his life of violence and to accept all the consequences for all the harm that he had done to others up until that time. And Angulimala had already agreed to listen to the Buddha's teachings. And when he heard that, he accepted that as his mission. And he agreed to follow the Buddha. Buddha shaved his head. And they together walked into the town. Well, meanwhile, the king of the town was being warned by the Buddha's disciples that the Buddha was out encountering Angulimala, and that he had told them that he was going to bring Angulimala to the town. They didn't really believe him, but they wanted to give the king warning that he was coming. And also they passed on the Buddha's message that just as the king had given protection, complete protection to all of the Buddha's disciples, if Angulimala came in as his disciple, the king would provide protection to Angulimala. And the king really didn't know what to do with this idea. I mean, he had already slain so many of the king's people. And at that point, one of the disciples says, well, here comes the master. And there's another behind him. And sure enough, there came Angulimala following the Buddha into the town before the king. And the king felt as if he was honor bound, that anyone who had become a disciple of the Buddha would be worthy of his protection. And so he bestowed one of the monk's robes onto Angulimala, who put it on. And he was bestowed the king's protection, although the king had to say, Angulimala, you have my protection to the extent that I can offer it. However, I cannot control all of the actions of the people whom you have harmed. So Angulimala did take up the life of the monk. And one of the things that monks did in those days is they needed to go out and beg for their food with the begging bowl each day. And when Angulimala went out, head shaved, in the monk's robes, the people could still recognize who that was. And he came back bloodied, without one of his eyes, and this is his first time out. So he ended up having to accept a great deal of suffering for all of these people whom he had slain. One of the interesting parts of the story is that his teacher had told him he needed to slay 1,000 people, or I'm not sure quite how it was worded, take the finger, slay the people, but he had to slay 1,000 to fulfill this mission that he was on from his original teacher. Well, he had already slain 999, and his mother heard that this king had set up a whole army that were going out to slay Angulimala. And she felt as if she had to do something to try to save her son. And so she came into the forest, and Angulimala was even willing to slay his own mother, who was taking that risk that he would do so. And so that was the point at which the Buddha interceded, walked in front of his den, and attracted Angulimala's attention. One of the commentaries at least says that the Buddha says that had he actually slain his mother, which is evidently one of the 5 worst sins in the Buddhist tradition, he would have been at that point incapable. He, as the Buddha, would have been incapable of saving and converting Angulimala to this right path. So he interceded just at that correct point where before he went just too far of taking his own mother's life. So kind of a related aspect of this has to do with this idea of motherhood. After Angulimala had become a monk, had received a lot of the townspeople's punishment for all the lives he had taken, he continued to do good and loving deeds. He never fought back, and he just continued to do loving deeds for the people. And he appeared at the place where a woman was giving birth, and she was in risk of losing the child. And he went back and asked the Buddha what he could do to save this child from being lost at birth. And the Buddha says, go and make an affirmation that you have never done an act of ahimsa or violence in this lifetime. And Angulimala says, well, I can't really say that honestly. And the Buddha says, say that you have never done an act of violence in this lifetime since you have been born into the noble family. So this idea of being born into the noble family is the idea of having committed oneself to the lineage of the Buddha. That he could say. So by him going and making this affirmation of his never having committed nonviolence in this lifetime, right there when the woman was about to give birth to this baby, it actually saved the life of the child. And then since then, it has become something that is done ritually before the birth of a child in some Buddhist places. And as they make this affirmation, and that is said to have the ritual effect of protecting the baby to come. So there's a little telling of the story of someone who seemed to be set on an irreversible path of violence, and who did an about face. And then, irregardless of the obstacles he met along that path, he continued forward with this righteous path of following the Buddha and the path of nonviolence. So I think we can open it up now.
What came to me when you talked about an irreversible eyes to the stars is I think the eyes stay on the star or on the intention. Like for me, it's becoming one with divine love, or sharing love and devotion and listening and being guided. And it's like, if you have a vision, what we talk about is owning that vision and keeping it inside of you, and then letting go of the steps it takes to get there. For example, we may think that we have to go this straight path, but we're led this way, but that really is for our highest good to get what our intention is. And I thought of a couple things. It's a practice, but I also thought that the monk, I can't say his name,
Angulimala.
Angulima. It was interesting because his intention was to become a monk, and he was told by the monk or his head monk to go do this as a way of receiving enlightenment or of becoming a monk. So his eye was on there, but then what he was led was way off, but he was following what he believed his teacher told him he had to do to receive it. And so when the Buddha came, it was like, that's not the way you do it. We're going to do it this way. And yet the compassion or the understanding of suffering has a profound effect on us as we're moving through the journey. We can think we want to be somewhere. The Buddhist saying is every step is the other shore. If you're going for enlightenment, realizing that every step is the other shore. And yet I think there's something around the intention, the irreversibility of the eyes to the stars of what is our intention? What is our ultimate intention or purpose? And sometimes it's to build a business. And if we're doing that, we keep our eyes on that, but we take little baby steps and follow with divine wisdom and divine guidance where our next step is. And it may take us places we don't think we should go. And yet I think there's something around faith and trust. And I actually felt like I had tears with this saying, because God, send me anywhere, only go with me. Lay any burden on me, only sustain me, and sever any tie in my heart except that tie that binds my heart to yours. And if you have men who will come, if they know there is good road, I don't want them. I want men who will come if there is no road at all. I will go anywhere and provided it be forward. And to me, the power of that is that we're not, for me, I'm not walking alone. I am being guided. And that there is a moving forward, but in my small ego mind, I don't think I know what that path looks like to get me where I need to go. And sometimes it's deep pain and deep sorrow. And yet it turns out that we learn from those and we are able, yeah, it's like, we'll go like that, but and we're moving toward it without saying, oh my God, well, we do say that, oh my God, it's taking me way off the path. But if we really want that, sometimes the reversals are important for spiritual development or even professional development before we can get to move to where we want to go. So I found that very powerful. And what came for me was practice, commitment, dedication, and the power of the vow, which you talked about. And so I think that it puts us on an irreversible track. It's only our perceived idea of what the straight path should look like. I mean, we think a straight path goes like that. Well, maybe the path goes like that. It's not straight, but it takes us to where we want to go. And I think that's more true than we really like. And for me, it's like working with working on the path. It's like, I don't particularly like change, although Tony would disagree with me because I do it all the time. But I like the steadiness and to feel safe. And yet we've been through a lot of different areas and places that have not been safe or that they challenge me. And I find they have all helped me either surrender more or it's helped me to grow inside myself to take the next step. So thank you. That was very powerful for me.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for those insights. I hadn't really thought about how he had dedicated himself to his first teacher's direction, who definitely sent him in a very wayward course. And I also, when you mentioned the eyes to the stars and the way you were using your hand, it reminded me of the the ocean voyagers who navigate by the stars. And of course, if you're using the winds, you can't ever follow a straight line. You've got to tap this way and that in order to use the power of the winds to get where you need to go. It's never a straight path. No.
Neither is our journey on this earth.
No, ever.
I think this has been such a powerful presentation. I mean, I've never heard this particular story. And when you're talking about the straight line, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, you can follow a straight line, but if it's going up a mountain and then down to the other side, you don't know what's going to be on the other side. So instead of veering, I was thinking going over. So, it's interesting to share the different aspects. And then with the story, what came to me is redemption, because we all go through things. We all do things that we're not happy, we're not proud of. But when we are atoning for any sins or wrongdoings, there's power in that. It's redemptive suffering, because when we suffer, we atone for things that we did before that were not good.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you bring up that idea of atonement, even though I think we could think in terms of a very salvationist approach, with the idea of us needing to reap what we sow. Even within that path of salvation, we are still going to have to reap what we sowed, and if those were seeds of misery toward others, we're going to have to somehow reap that, and it was interesting, wasn't it, how completely willing and fearless he was about suffering. He just knew he wasn't going to be stopped from this next great adventure, or the furthering of the adventure he was already on, by anything that to others might cause fear, or he was guaranteed to be facing suffering. He was absolutely undaunted, knowing that he was going into it. I don't think he said, oh, well, this isn't really going to make me suffer. No, he's like, bring it on. I want the next adventure.
Oh, I thought it was also very touching, and also very relatable when you said that he looked into the Buddha's eyes. Because when you look into someone's eyes, they can't hide things from you. You can see what they're thinking. You can kind of tell if they're being honest or not. So I love that, because it's just takes just a second to change us. We think we've got everything set and in line, and we know our purpose, and then oops, that completely changes. And that's nothing wrong with that. I think it's a blessing, and it makes us better people. Amen.
Yeah,
I really like what you, oh, I'm sorry. I really like what you said, Mary. I just want to comment. The idea of up and down hills is such a beautiful metaphor, because instead of going off the path, that is the path. And it goes up and down, and it may go in a circle or whatever. But I love that analogy, because I think that's very powerful to see that there are ups and downs on the straight path. It just doesn't look like, we think we're going someplace else, but no, this is the path. So thank you. That was really important.
Something that also comes to mind is that being off the path could also be the path, right? Again, it's not forward, you're moving this way and that way, but it's still being on the path, right? It can look like mountain can look like this, but it can also look like this, right? You have to make a turn here and there. But something that I keep thinking of is also like the choice, right? Making that choice. He made a choice when he decided to go into this path. He looked into the Buddha's eyes and he saw the possibility. So being able to have the will to choose what comes next too, that's so important. And at the beginning of the talk, Renee, you said how this year is full of conversations about free will and destiny and dedication. I think being open to see more possibilities, to go on for the adventure, to keep moving, just keep going. It's such a powerful lesson of this story too, like making that choice, right? After all the harm, everything that he did, just seeing what's beyond that, right? It didn't stop there. Like, that's not the end. There is more. Now it's time to do good, to learn about the goodness. So I don't know, it makes me think about change, irreversible change. Like, it's always there. It's always a choice away, moving forward. Doesn't matter how it looks. Whatever you go, if you go right, you're still moving, right, to a certain direction. So very powerful story. And yeah, redemption also really resonated with me. Like, the ability to make that choice and have, this community of people around you that grab your hand and walk with you and show you love. And, you're probably in that path where you're down, and you can go back up because of looking into the Buddha's eyes. So yeah, very powerful.
That, I guess, part of why I think that the idea of destiny will probably come up in regard to this idea of irreversibility. A couple of reasons is as we're making choices, at some point, a series of choices seem as if they're inevitably going to cause a certain result. So different ones of you may have heard me use this analogy before, but if you're running up to the edge of a cliff, you can run up, and you can stop, you can not stop. Right? There's some point at which preventing that from happening, it's too late. And so it sounded like within that story, had he taken his mother's life as that 1,000th life, that was going to be too late, at least in that lifetime, for the Buddha to be able to help him turn around. He would have done something so horrendous that within a Buddhist context, he could be reborn in another lifetime. There are stories of Angulimala in a previous lifetime, so you can assume there's a future lifetime where, okay, he gets another chance to get it right. But within this lifetime, he's kind of gone off that edge, it sounds like. So there's that. And then also this idea of irreversibility. I like to think that with that power of that vow to follow the path of the Buddha, or that when he made that true statement that he had never committed an act of violence since he was born into the noble family, what an irreversibility that caused, it sounds like, for the rest of his existence. Like, never again. That violence is never, ever, ever happening again. I am leading a non-violent life going forward. I'm leading a life of love. And so there's a destiny perhaps to that. It comes from an act of free will. And yet it leads to this sure result. So isn't that interesting that we can play with those free will and destiny ideas together?
Well, and what came up for me a couple times when you're talking to me, who do we listen to? I mean, the truth is, do we listen? I mean, there's so many people listening to so much right now, and what's truth and what's not truth, and what part of it is our ego and what part of it is our core self or our true self, and how do we listen to divine will or God in our lives, and how do we be quiet so that we can let that in? And it's like, really, who do we follow? and it's like there's lots of, look at Jonestown, everyone died because they followed that person. It's like, who do we listen to, and how do we find the truth that is inside of ourselves and say, what he's asking is doesn't fit with my internal truth, to do that. That doesn't fit, and to say no, because I think we get so caught up in following somebody, or they've got the answers, instead of going inside and listening to God inside, or finding that truth inside of ourselves. We end up listening. Who do we listen to? That, and we make the vow. Who do we make the vow to?
Yeah, I like that. I think who we listen to is the one that says, do no harm. And it's harm to others, harm to ourselves, harm to our land, because ultimately, we want to be good people. This circle is just chock full of wonderful people who, we're preaching to the choir, but we're also, how we act will also affect the people around us, our children, grandchildren, our co-workers, our neighbors. Do no harm. I forget who came up with that quote, but it's always resonated with me. And of course, our egos are so big. And we want what we want when we want it. And yeah, if we can just remember, do no harm. And another thing that came to mind was when Anguli Lama,
Mala. Have you ever
Anguli
heard about
Mala.
mala boots? The
Yeah.
mala boots people wear?
Yes, yes. But
That's
I
a
was
necklace.
thinking it was amazing that they didn't just kill him, because he had killed so many other people, and there's the death penalty, there's the eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. I thought, wow, if they only beat him up and took one eye, but they let him live, that's a miracle in itself. And when we hear of atrocities that have happened, when we hear of one person killing another person, we really get upset, but at the same time, we remember that when we point one finger at a person, we're pointing three back at ourselves. So it's a sobering fact, or a sobering thought. And yeah, we need to constantly be reminding ourselves that sometimes we're no better than the bad guy we're grumbling about. Amen.
Sometimes we can do in the world of thought what others are doing in the world of exterior deeds, and getting the physical repercussions of having done it. And we think we're escaping it because we're only doing it in the world of thought. That may not be true.
I'm also thinking of the topic and the story, how the Buddha was like, he was irreversible, like forward, trying to find this Angulimala, right? And how his path the whole time, when you look at his life, it's been forward, it's been forgiveness, it's been love, it's been redemption, like, always be straightforward, look at people with love. So the story at first is terrific. You listen to it and it's like, wait, what's going to happen to this guy? But when the Buddha comes and decides to forgive him and have so much faith in his way, or like this straightforward path that's love, that's such a beautiful story. It makes me feel that this is story, it's about love, no matter what, right? There are so many things out there in the world happening, and we go personally to all those ups and downs, but I think to remember that it's love what keep us going and moving forward, whatever you call that God, or you call that a mala, or you call that a hula practice, but just remember all those things are love, and thinking that way, I think is such a beautiful part of the story, right? Like, yeah, there is all this suffering, there is all these atrocities that Angulimala did, but yeah, there is the Buddha always there in the story, like with love, trusting that his love is going to save him. His love is the way, like this straight path, it's love. And that's how we go through these ups and downs. And yeah, it's almost like too makes me feel like, yeah, as long as we're doing that, doing our best, no matter what that voice is and who that is, as long as we're striving for that, to give love and always be compassionate and make that choice of irreversible change of like, it's always love. Every time we go away from that, we always make that choice of like, no, it's always love. I think I got a little lost here, but yeah, it's like the point of the story too, right? Besides thinking of all this negative thing, is like how the Buddha's trust and vision and way of being, so his way forward, like this is it, make Angulimala be a better person. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he told his disciples, I will bring this bandit into the village with me as my disciple.
He saw it. So just seeing it, no matter where he's going, he knew exactly he was going into the wolf mouth, but yet he's like, I'm going to be there and I'm going to light a candle in here. So, yeah.
And the wolf's going to follow me.
Yeah. 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 I love that.
Yeah. I think that do no harm comes, Mary, probably from the Hippocratic oath that doctors and nurses take, for example, that no matter what, in terms of healing, at minimum, do no harm. If nothing else in what you're doing, at least do no harm. Yeah, I think that's where it comes from. And that was a very powerful oath. I was with someone who had actually someone had attempted to murder her. And now there was a time for a court case, and her lawyers and her family and her friends were all saying to go for the death penalty. And even though it was her ex-husband who was on trial for this, even though he had accused her of things, managed to take both of their kids away from her, so now she no longer had her own children, and he had tried to murder her. She just couldn't reconcile herself with this idea of asking for the death penalty. And she was really so torn up inside about everybody telling her she should do this, and she just couldn't. She couldn't do it. And we were talking, and I said, well, you're a nurse. You've taken the Hippocratic oath. You've taken the oath to do no harm. So now you're in a context where it seems to make a lot of sense for you to ask that this person face the death penalty. And it also makes a lot of sense, more sense, that you cannot do it because you have taken this vow, you've taken this oath to do no harm. And so you can feel good in standing behind that. And that was, once she made that realization of, yes, that was something that she had made at such a deep soul level. It wasn't just like a professional kind of thing that she had done. No, she had done that at a soul level. And so in order to be true to herself, she had to reject everything that her family, friends, and attorneys were telling her, and not pursue the court case in that manner. And it just was one of those instances for me where I could see the protective influence of a powerful affirmation or vow, and how, just like one of the things Gandhi says is that a vow is like a right angle. It's not here, it's not there. Those are very, very weak. But if you make a vow, you created a right angle, and that is very strong. That is not wavering at all. And so it was so interesting to see how Val was able to just give her so much soul comfort to be able to go back to that vow and hold true to that. What a powerful one, right? To do no harm. Yeah. Well, we have a very short amount of time. I wanted to point out in regard to our themes for this year, and Sharoni, maybe you could show the themes, that this idea of eyes to the stars, to me, did have very much to do with navigating our journey, our voyage, and also with the idea that the stars are following an irreversible course in terms of where they are in the sky in regard to us watching them. They're just going to keep traveling, or our view of them as we go around the sun, our view of these stars and these constellations is just going to continue irreversibly. That's going to happen. And even if it looks like if we say that planet Mercury has gone retro, that's just something that is our eyes are being fooled by its path. It actually just keeps going in the same direction. And even if the Earth tips on its axis, it doesn't stop spinning. It might tip, but it doesn't stop. It's irreversible course of onward moving. So it seemed to me that this almanac, which, as I've mentioned to you before, I get my inspiration from, in creating the themes for it, from an almanac that was created in the 70s and 80s called the Aquarian Almanac. And so the year that this one was patterned after, which I believe was 1984, had the theme of the zodiac. And then there were themes throughout the entire year going through the 12 different signs of the zodiac. And there were articles being published in Hermes magazine on each of these zodiacal signs that students could study. And I found these articles to be so deep and rich, and they were not only looking at Western astrology, but also Vedic astrology, and then also referencing many other cultures, mythologies. They were so overwhelmingly rich and deep and to a certain extent esoteric to me. I didn't feel as if I had the wisdom to be able to conduct our conversations adequately around these different themes of the zodiacal signs. However, in your almanac, for every week that would have been devoted to a certain zodiacal sign, you will find in the almanac one quote about that sign. So you can kind of keep your eyes open for it if you're curious. You may realize that Western astrology, for the most part, has not kept track with the way that the signs in the the constellations had continued to move. And so all of the signs are somewhat shifted in the dates compared to what, like if we read the horoscope in the newspaper, what it says it is. If you to actually compare it to where that constellation is in the sky, those are not the dates. So the dates that correspond to where things are astrologically in the sky are the way that they're listed in this almanac when you see where the different weeks fall. So I just wanted to kind of give you that little inside information about the almanac, and know that this recording will be available online for others to find out about it. The theme for next week is going to be Aquarian humanity. So in terms of which you can see for June 6th. And one of the things that goes on astrologically is that we move into different great cycles. And in about 1902, we change from the Piscean age, which Jesus was born near the very beginning of, and we have moved into the Aquarian age now. And whereas the Piscean age, for example, was marked by travel by water, the fish, Pisces, the Aquarian age is one that is marked by travel by air. So very soon, within a matter of months after the beginning of the Aquarian age, Orville and Wilbur Wright flew the first plane. So it's interesting. And so some of the things that would pertain to the humanity of the Piscean age now are shifted evidently in this Aquarian age. So that will be interesting to take up, I think, for next week's theme. The week after that will be facing our shadow. And then we will just, as a general idea, look at the idea of the zodiac on the 20th. I love that next theme for the week of what does the soul need for its evolution. A couple other things to notice in here are we're going to study different ones of the yogas. So if you look on February 10th, we'll have Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge. If you go down to March 9th, we have Bhakti Yoga, the path of devotion. If you go down to April 6th, you see Karma Yoga. Karma, in this sense, is translated as action. So Karma Yoga is the path of skill and action. And then if you go up to May 4th, we have Buddhi Yoga. And Buddhi is translated from Sanskrit as the path of compassionate insight. Also, in regard to preparing for our next Diwali celebration, we have some of the characters from the story of Rama, the Ramayana. And so April 3rd, 13th, you'll see Prince Rama, his devotee, Sri Hanuman, the monkey hero. May 11th is his wife and bride, Princess Sita. And I was thinking of including Ravana, the Demon King, and I decided against that one. And then for about the last third of the year, we have a lot of different virtues. Now, these are taken from Buddhist virtues, and they have correlations in all of the different traditions. So August 10th, we have Shanti, the virtue of patience. September 7th, we have Viraga, the virtue of seeing the whole. October 12th, Virya, the virtue of dauntless striving. Bob Buss has already told me he wants to talk about that one. Then let's see, November 16th, we have the virtue of contemplation. And December 28th, we have the virtue of prajna, a spiritual wakefulness. I might have missed a couple. Oh, yeah, let's see. Yes, okay, I missed the first two. July 6th is Sheila, the virtue of balancing the inner and the outer. And the first virtue is June 8th. And this is, of course, is a very universal virtue, the virtue of charity. I'm very much looking forward to each of you helping in terms of as you've done so far, agreeing to be one of our presenters and kicking off our conversations. And I'm also very much hoping this year that those who are in the group and regularly participate will help in finding new presenters for us or return presenters for us, but just suggesting to me people, it's a task that would really help me out a lot is to have some suggestions and maybe even contacting people on our behalf and telling them what GEMS is about, and also asking if they would be willing to be presenters. That we had those two wonderful Christian presenters. What did they call themselves? Each of them were progressive. They called themselves progressive Christians that we had at the end, near the end of this last year, 2023. And oh my goodness, they were such wonderful finds. So I'm really looking forward to having a little bit of extra help finding presenters, if you'll be so kind. So at minimum, if you could look through the themes for 2024 and let me know any that particularly strike you as something that you might be able to give some thought to. This is very much a place of lifelong learning. And I certainly feel like I learn every single time that I come to one of these, conduct one of these. Sometimes I set myself these themes, just knowing I really don't understand this at all. And I am sure by us studying it together that we'll all come to a greater understanding, including myself. I know it's a worthy topic, but I just don't get it yet. And so I think it's okay for us to go into a topic going, I'm not really sure I know what I'm going to be talking about at all. I am willing to delve into it and see where it takes me. And I know I'll get a lot of help when I make an opening presentation to the group. We'll all get more out of it together, which I certainly feel as if we did today. So thank you.
You remind me of one of my basic Christian community affirmations is God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. So we are all, we are stepping out of our comfort zone when we agree to make a presentation. But even when we think we know a lot, we certainly learn more. And thank you, Renée, for this beautiful, beautiful opportunity that you've given all of us. And yes, we look forward to many, 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 many more.
Indeed.
I also want to do a thank you, Renée. You didn't ask for a thank you this time because it was you, but you're so amazing how you're bringing us all together and opening our eyes to new possibilities and stretching us to learn and from each other and to create someplace safe enough that we can all feel safe enough to share our truth and know that it will be respected, may not be agreed with, but it will be respected and loved. And you have created, you are changing the world. And I'm just so grateful that I am part of your community. And I love you so much.
Hey, thank you so much. This is incredible. Such a blessing. Best way to spend Saturday evening just learning and growing. And I just keep thinking about this conversation because at first I'm like, oh no, I want to go do this, do that. And now that I've been consistently being part of it, I'm like looking forward for it. I'm like, what is next week? What am I going to learn? And there's always so many different perspectives, and thank you for that, for allowing us to see all the sides and learn and connect. And yeah, thank you.
Yes, well, it's only possible with you. So- You're fulfilling one of my highest desires to be able to have these kinds of conversations. Yeah,
New
truly.
Year to everyone and blessings.
Yes. We'll see you next year.